Welcome back to It's a Tool Thing, drawer number 9 on the toolbox tour. This one's going to take a few minutes. This is my extensions and ratchet drawer. First off, I've got 3 of these silverware bins. They're something actually I picked up at Walmart for I think $6 a piece, somewhere in that neighborhood. Or for large utensils, I believe. But they work really good. My theory with most things is to contain the stuff, not necessarily be perfectly organized, but to at least keep it in a position where I know where I need to look for it. First bin here is 3/8 drive, impact and regular non-flex extensions. I've got multiple links, some Craftsman, some Mac, some Matco, Snap-on. I really not that picky on extensions. I do like the nicer US-made extensions, but most of the time I don't have an issue with them, at least in normal extension use. The next bin back is 3/8 drive again, but it has wobbly extensions. I've got locking extensions in here, 3/8 drive, wobblies, non-impact wobblies. I actually keep my Sun X impact wobbly extensions in my carry tote, and I've been very happy with those. I've been putting them through their paces for probably 6-8 months now with no issues. And they do have a really long one. I want to say it's like 14-15 inches long in that kit. It's a good price. Seems like they're decent quality. They're not made in the USA. I believe they're Taiwan made. But I've had very good luck with them, so I would recommend them as an item to purchase. I have down here, I bought this. It's actually it was a 2-piece set. This is a 3/8 drive, fit into a ratchet or a ratcheting wrench. I haven't gotten any use out of them really, mostly because I don't think about it. I need to try to put them into service. I have this one here, and then I have another one back in the next bin I'll point out. That's in quarter drive. Came in a set I got from Mac years ago. I have several of these extended universal style extensions. This is a 15mm 6-point Snap-on. I pick them up used when I see them. I should have picked up the other ones they had with this one, but they weren't sizes I normally use. But in retrospect, being as I got a pretty good price on them, I probably should have picked them up anyways. I have a couple more of these. These are the older style ones from what I understand, and I try to be a little more gentle with them because apparently when they break, you will get one of these newer style ones, which are definitely way more beefy and can take more abuse. But maneuverability wise, in particular this one here, this 10mm 12-point, works really good on PTOs. So I try not to abuse it too much. Definitely use it a lot, but I'm not going to sit there and impact on it. I will break it loose by hand and then use this to spin it out. But they are actually really handy. One thing I can say about this one back here, I just thought of. I was actually in a situation working on a manual one day, and I was having problems getting a regular impact wobbly into position, and I actually didn't think this was going to fit because it was between the top of the transmission and the bottom of the cab. But this thing actually worked really well, even though I would consider it a little bulky down here at the socket end. But it worked really well getting in there. I was impressed. That's pretty much what's in this bin. There's another one of these 13mm 12-point old style. Don't use that one as much, but we do use 13mm quite a bit on our stuff. Next bin back is quarter drive extensions. I have this is a quarter drive Snap-on extra long ratchet that I modified and put the 3/8 anvil into. I've done a little bit of a review on it. I've actually had it for about maybe 6 months or so, maybe a little less than that, and I already destroyed the gears in it once. I was trying to use it as a daily driving tool, and I did like the maneuverability of it, the thinness of the head, the fineness of the tooth, and then with the comfort gives you a little better handle if you're going to be using it all the time. But the gear set did not hold up. I was able to get the Snap-on guy to warranty it with no issue, which I was pleased with. Being I purchased the gear set from the Snap-on guy, but not the ratchet itself. But he knew I was making the conversion, but I was concerned that he knew it was going into an improper ratchet and might have refused the warranty, but I had no issues with that. So this pin's got an extra 10mm 12-point socket, adapter. I keep a complete set of adapters up in the main drawer, but just have some extra adapters. Here's another actually converted. This is a quarter body ratchet with a 3/8 drive installed in it. It's an older non-dual 80. It's got a pretty fine tooth in it, but not quite as fine. It still works fine. I ended up buying a flex head, which is a dual 80, and that had the 3/8 handle in it, so I went ahead and swapped it out. Been using that as my daily use. I'm really happy with it. It's got a really fine mechanism in it. Actually even feels finer than this, even though it's the exact same gear set. I have had a little bit of problem with the shifter, not wanting to stay in direction, bumping it and getting it to shift on that shorter one. And then I've got some more locking extensions. This is actually a Mac one. Just a variety of stuff that I collect. Most of my stuff is used, so I kind of get what I get. I have been pretty impressed. I think it's right here, this Mac wobbly actually seems to work a little better than the Snap-on ones. I'm not sure if the Snap-on ones I have are just worn out or if there's a slightly different cut on that, but it works pretty good. It actually came in a kit of a couple of items that I wanted. One of the other items, and this one was in there with it, so I ended up buying it anyways, and I'm happy I did. Back here is that other ratchet wrench adapter for 1/4 inch. Like I said, I haven't really put it in the service. I need to put it in service, try it out, and see if I like it. I'm sure it would work fine, especially with some of these newer ratchet wrenches I have that have a little bit finer tooth in them. Next bin, I always try to keep a razor blade somewhere in this drawer for opening boxes, as I call them, Christmas presents. Because whenever you're working on stuff, you're always unpacking stuff. Make sure you have the proper items to get the job done. That's a good point, is to get those things opened when you get them and make sure that the item isn't damaged and it looks like it's the right part for what you're doing. Because that way you can get the proper thing ordered if necessary, or more things ordered if you realize that maybe it doesn't come with a gasket and you thought it did in the kit. Get back to the drawer here. I have a set of magnetic adapted, super shallow. This is actually from 3/4 all the way down to 1/4. These are actually Mac Expert. I have 2 sets of these. I actually got a really good deal. One set I bought new off the truck. He had them on his truck and the box was all beat to tar, and I said something to him and he said, hey, I'll just sell them to you cheap, because he wanted them off the truck because they didn't look pretty. But they are actually impact rated and they are super slim. I have some Snap-on ones, the really old ones that are wafer thin, that are probably 3 times as thin as these, right here in this head area, because that's where you're gaining length. And they're also magnetic, but from what I understand, Snap-on won't replace those. Definitely not with the same item like for like, because they don't make them anymore or purchase them anymore. I think Star made them. I have actually found them on the Matco catalog, those super thin ones. I don't know if they actually have them in stock. I was considering buying them, but I never have. So those are pretty handy for when you're in a tight situation. I've got nut drivers here, some old style handle ones. I believe this one here, I'll point out, was actually one of my new purchases, which is a rare thing for me. but I actually purchased this thing probably 30 years ago, 25 years ago. About the same time I purchased those screwdrivers in my previous drawer. It's a wobbly end. I definitely remember making that purchase. It's one of the first ones. I have a quarter drive nut driver. This one actually is pretty nice because it's a pass-through, so you can use an extension or use a ratchet to break it loose and then nut driver it off. It comes in pretty handy. I don't use nut drivers every day, but that's probably the most commonly used nut driver I have. This other nut driver here is a 3/8 drive. Once again, I don't know if I use it very often, but I saw it and said I'd snag it. This ratchet here is actually a 1/4 inch older version, not dual 80. It's actually the only ratchet in this toolbox that is standard length with the correct drive, in this case 1/4 drive in it. I don't use it much. I tend not to like standard length ratchets. Either I want it stubby or the next drive size down, like the 1/4 inch body with a 3/8 drive in it. But I think that's the only one I have. I used to have a 1/2 inch snap-on standard length ratchet, and I actually sold to one of the other guys because I never used it. And he was looking for a ratchet. I have my air tire checker here, just kind of in this drawer, in this bin. I have a complete set of these indexing ratchets. This is an old snap-on one. From what I understand, they actually do make one currently. There for a while they didn't make them, and then they made them in a Blue Point version. But I've heard people say that these indexing ratchets are not that handy, but they're definitely not an everyday use kind of thing. But when you need them, I tend to use them around bell housings or PTOs. They give you that little bit of offset to be able to get in there, and I find that they're handy. This one here is a snap-on, as I said. I have a Mac one right here. This was actually a new item, I believe, but it was purchased from eBay. And it's a different version of the same idea. It's got a spring-loaded locking system here, and then you rotate the head and lock it back in. This ratchet's been pretty good. The one thing I would say is the detemp ball in it is not strong enough. I've had sockets come off this quite a few times, but I do like it because it's compact. It has that rotating head feature, so I can get in different angles. And then I have a 3/8 T-handle I tend to use for taps. Don't use them very often, but got a couple of these. But they are handy for taps. I like them for when I'm starting to tap. And then here is another standard length ratchet. It's a 3/8 body, but it has a 1/2 inch head in it. It's a little bit shorter and definitely more narrow in the head than the 1/2 inch counterpart, the actual body, 1/2 inch body ones. It's an older snap-on. I don't use this one very often, but it really does come in handy for you'll get a plug broke loose on an engine, and you can use that to get in there and wheel it out, usually with one of these adapters over here, because they're usually 3/4 drive, it seems like for flex plate bolts. And then I have this universal snap-on ratchet. You can put an extension in the end or in the front and use it as an offset. It's kind of like a torque adapter. I've had this thing for a long time, and I can't say I've ever actually used it. I was thinking about getting rid of it, but I already own it, and I could see a scenario where you need to have that depth of a socket, be it shallow or deep, but you also need the offset, and so I decided I could go ahead, or you could use it on extension. Go ahead and keep it. At some point, hopefully it will come in handy. I'm always getting myself into tight situations just like everybody else working on vehicles, and I could see it coming in handy. I just never really have had any luck using it. Next drawer back here, or bin back here, excuse me. Sorry about the moving. Trying to get a good angle on this here. is the 1/2-inch drive, which these adapters probably should be in. I have this old style ratchet. I just purchased this just recently, mostly because I bought that 36-inch long breaker bar, snap-on breaker bar I picked up, and I figured there would be a time where this ratchet mechanism might come in handy. I got it at a really good price, so I'm not too worried about it. But I could see where maybe you only got 4 positions when you're dealing with a square. And if you're using a 6-point socket, you might not be able to get on a fastener. And if you can afford the depth of this, it would make a difference. Got a currently replaced, or I should say recently replaced, 1/2-inch 10 style impact adapter. Just got that replaced here not that long ago. My air chuck for airing up tires. Not something we do very often, but every now and again you need to air something up. And then just a few 1/2-inch. I got one wobbly, another wobbly extension, and these are actually spare of these particular lengths that I keep in my other bin. So I don't have a whole bunch of 1/2-inch drive here because the majority of my 1/2-inch ones are in that black bin in the top drawer. And then back here I have phone wire down on the bottom here. Slide this over. This is a pretty good tip. This phone wire is extremely handy. It's harder and harder to seem to find these days. If you see an old building getting tore down, it's always a good thing to see if you can maybe get a hold of some of this. But it's really handy for identification. You can cut it off and put it on both sides of cables or air lines or hydraulic lines or whatever it might be. And they come in multiple colors, so you can keep things identified, because sometimes you won't be back to them for a few days. I actually did that on a truck, and it was a big piece of ag equipment, and ended up being the drop box was damaged, and they didn't make very many of them, and they had to have parts custom machined, and we didn't go put that thing back together for a year and a half. And when we did, that kind of situation really came in handy because everything was marked, so I knew where it went. Mine was still a little hard because it had been so long since we had the part, but we kept all the bolts contained in the vehicle, and then we had everything well marked, so it made it as easy as possible. And the rest of this bin is 3/4 drive. These 2 extensions back here came with that 3/4 drive shallow impact set, and these other ones are just a random 3/4 drive extensions. I just purchased these 2 shorter ones. I ran into a situation where my shortest, which is this one, 3/4 drive extension, would not fit. It was too much length, but you couldn't do it without an extension, so I ended up purchasing these 2. And I was just going to buy one of them, but there is about an inch difference in socket length, drive length extension, and I decided to go ahead and grab them both for a couple bucks. Story of my life with tools. And then in the back here I have a little bag of mini zip ties. I don't use them very often, but I try to keep at least one bag of those around, where a standard zip tie won't fit, maybe just putting a tag or something on. And then this 3/4 drive, actually there's 2 of these SKs, and I actually got them years ago at my previous shop. I found them in a toolbox and they were broken, and I was able to take them back at the time to Baxter's and get them warrantied out, and never had any problems with them myself. I don't use them a lot, but for free, that's a really good price. We'll move over to the other side of the box here, the drawer. I've got a whole bunch of ratchets. Basically, I'm using the full depth of this drawer. It is not very well organized, but it does keep it contained. And for the most part, these are all second grab ratchets. My everyday ratchets are already in my carry tote. I have a 3/4 drive snap-on handle for my ratchets in the top. It's an extra one, the shorter handle with the knurl on it. And then I have this 1/2-inch drive T-bar. I actually just purchased this. I'm not sure it'll ever really come in handy, but I figured for a couple bucks I'd grab it up and maybe I'll find a use for it at some point. And then I have the longer snap-on breaker bar, and then the shorter, I think 15 or so inch breaker bar. And then I have this little Eastco. I was actually considering purchasing a breaker bar and cutting it down, be able to use it for half-inch drive sockets where you just need to hold one side, don't really need any leverage. But I ended up running across the Eastco. Got a real nice knurl on it. I don't know if you can see that. USA made Eastco, but you know, she's a shorty for being half-inch drive. But it comes in handy for holding. I have used that a few times. It's worked pretty well. This is one of the dual 80 ratchets I just purchased, the bin handles. I've been using the Comfort Grip one that I purchased right after I purchased this one, which I probably didn't need two of, but that's okay. I'll probably end up taking this one, putting it out in the shop truck, because the bin handle I have in the shop truck is not a dual 80, and I am becoming a real fan of those dual 80 ratchets. 3/8 breaker bar here. This is a half-inch drive extension that is pretty long and did not fit in the bin. And then here is my third indexable ratchet. This one's actually, I've got all the brands covered apparently. This one's actually an Armstrong. It appears to be using the exact same mechanism as the Mac one with the release here and the teeth. This was actually the reason that I got rid of the snap-on standard length ratchet. It's got a pretty fine tooth in it, and it was, I would say, maybe an inch longer or something. I don't remember exactly, but it wasn't much longer, and it was like, I'm not going to use that other one anyways. So I figured that this would be a good substitution. It gives me one ratchet that'll do two different things. And I already have that adapted 3/8 drive one for when I need in tight areas anyways. Next up here, I have one of my older bin handles. This is actually a really smooth one. The head's still pretty stiff. It'll probably become a backup in this box as my primary backup when I move that dual 80. I definitely like my bin handle ratchets. Next here is a snap-on non-dual 80. I've had this for a long time. Locking flex head 3/8 drive. I never have gotten a whole bunch of use out of this ratchet. I have definitely used it a lot, but like I said, I always seem to go back to the bin handle. And I'm not a huge fan of the locking system. This one here is a little better because I got the button down lower. The new ones have the button, I think, clear up here, if I remember right. But they don't tend to stay in this unlock position very well. Right now it'll stay in there because you're not really using it, but when you use it, that button will get bumped and then the thing will lock into an angle that you may not want it to. I actually prefer the Matco ratchets for their locking system, and I do have a few out in the shop truck. Maybe I'll do a tour out there of the tools. I used to have a 3/8 one. One of the guys in the shop was hard up for a ratchet. He had lost his, so I went ahead and sold him the 3/8 drive one, but I still have a half-inch one. Like a 17. I used to have, and I think I have a 24 out there also. I used to have a 24 in here, but somehow it magically disappeared one day. Not sure how you lose a 2-foot long ratchet. But that's actually how I ended up with, I've got two of these in here. Comfort Grip, which I'm kind of growing on the Comfort Grip, to be honest, with this bin handle with the Comfort Grip. I could go either way. I'm not saying I have to have it, but I used to not be a fan of them. But I'm kind of working my way there. I've got two of these. I got one here and one here of the 24-inch non-locking snap-on ratchets. I ended up picking them up for a really good deal. I found one and then I found another. Story of my life. So I went ahead and picked them both up after I had lost that other unit. I do wish they had some kind of a locking system or a detent system, but they still work just fine. Next here, I have a 3/4 breaker bar with the breaker bar handle or end on it, and the T-bar handle. I don't actually have the T-bar that slides on here, but I don't use it very often. Now that I got that knurl handle, I probably won't use this handle much anymore at all. Next up, I've got a whole bunch of extensions over here. Got a snap-on locking non-dual 80 17-inch. This used to be my go-to for this length ratchet and 1/2-inch drive, but I've been tending to go ahead and use, if possible, the 3/8 extra long, either the straight or the flex, unless I have to use a 1/2-inch drive socket, which I have 3/8 drive sockets up to 1 inch. So most cases I don't need that unless I'm doing like an 1 1/8 fastener or something like that, or 1 1/8 headed fastener. It's been a good ratchet. I do wish it was the dual 80. It's a little bit notchy. So down here I have one of the snap-on dual 80 extra long fixed head ratchet. Probably shouldn't have purchased it. I've got a couple of them. I've got a Cornwell one, I believe, and then 2 snap-ons. And I do like it when you're putting a little more load on the 3/8. Not having the flex is an advantage, but it just didn't make sense to keep it in my other main drawer, so I didn't. It's kind of getting stuffed in here, and it doesn't get used as much because it's not in that main drawer. Moving along here, I've got a really long 1/4 drive locking extension. I bought this. I bought an entire set of these, and it came with the Blue Point 3/8 drive. I showed one earlier here, locking extensions, and I wasn't particularly, the Blue Point ones, they don't look like they're as good a quality, hence the Blue Point, probably not USA made, laser etched instead of engraved. But I couldn't get them to split the set up, so I ended up picking them all up, and I'm happy that I did. I didn't have any locking extensions, and I have found them to be pretty handy. So I'm glad overall that I ended up with them, even though I feel like I'd be better served with maybe a little higher quality. Then I have a 1/4-inch nut driver with a flexible shaft. It's pretty handy for getting fitting fasteners started, maybe bang clamps or little nuts or something like that. And then next up in this drawer, I've got a whole bunch of extensions here. I've got 24-inch max. Got some Craftsman's. Over this one here's a Craftsman. 3/8 drive. I have the Mac impacting adapted extensions. 1/2-inch drive on this side and 3/8 drive on this side. I do like these. I've had these extensions for a long time, but they have the lock rings on the end, and they don't tend to hold sockets particularly well. So if you're in a real tight situation, I tend to tape them up with electrical tape just to keep them having to chase my sockets down. I do have a couple of the snap-on thin shank ones, but apparently I don't see one in this drawer. Oh, I have a extra long one up in this other drawer, and I think I have one in my shop truck that's in this length here, roughly. And then I have a Craftsman extra, or 20-inch, I believe, extension, and then one of these flexible magnets here in the corner. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.